All right, so welcome everyone to session 4. It's my great pleasure tonight to introduce tonight's speaker, Mel Schnapper. Mel and we met a few years ago. We kept finding ourselves in the same professional circles in terms of going to different professional associations. I think the first meeting we met up at was the ISPI Potomac chapter meeting. And then later that same year, we bumped into one another at the name of the organization is called CIATAR, and it stands for the Society for Intercultural Education, Training, and Research. And I guess it was, it was in 2010 or 2011, and Mel had shared with me that this was a group that was actually started by Peace Corps volunteers who were wanting to maintain professional development or the Peace Corps organization, and I had no idea that there was a connection to Peace Corps, and then that's how I discovered that we had both served as volunteers. And then of course we would connect with each other at AATD events, and we realized that we both had interest in the ISPI 10 standards, and we started meeting to learn more about the CPT certification. So I got to learn all about the good work that Mel was doing. And we're very fortunate tonight. Mel was in Italy, and then he traveled to Namibia. So he's presenting tonight's program from Namibia, and it's 2 a.m. He has shared with me that if we should lose connection with him, to just hold on the line, that happens, and he'll be right back. So having said that, Mel?
Catherine, thank you for the introduction. And for folks that are attending, you can chat me your questions, and I'll look at the chat panel. And I've gotten your brief bios and your questions of the presentation, and I should go through this basic webinar in less than an hour, and then I can turn to your questions and answer them, which I have in text, but I can maybe talk to you while you chat me back. Also, I will invite one of you, at least one of you, to volunteer and take you through the process of creating very rigorous metrics for your own performance objectives, regardless of your particular project that you're working on or whatever it is. All right, so into the seminar, and let me close up the, oh no, I can still see it. Okay. The title is Connecting ISD and Human Performance Improvement, and through the 3 M's of performance. And the 3 M's are measure, manage, and magnify. And there's a lot of redundancy in this presentation on purpose, because people don't get this stuff right away. I've even had people take the full seminar twice, and the second time they said, why didn't I say that the first time? Which I did, but the way you really learn about this stuff is to do it. So this is going to be a somewhat lecture-y presentation, and let's continue. My experience with metrics is, well, we've all had experience with metrics. We've all been tested our whole lives. Even as infants, we might have had some emotional intelligence sort of test. You know, are we mature enough to go to preschool and play nice with the other boys and girls? And all of those testing procedures involved metrics, not just IQ at some later stage, but other metrics of maturity or emotional stability, etc. My first professional encounter with metrics was when I was training Peace Corps volunteers in various languages, and I was a language coordinator, and my skills would be assessed by someone from the U.S. State Department, FSI. And the interesting thing about learning about metrics in a very precise way through language is so many people in the metrics field ignore qualitative metrics. That means they're ignoring most of their own life as well, as far as focusing on measurement. In linguistics, there's a scoring system of 0 to 5. 0 is you know nothing, and 5 you have native language fluency. And the increments are 0 plus 1, 1 plus 2, so half a numerical interval, and you can have 10 judges and they will rate the same speaker, maybe with a half a number apart. So it's all very reliable and valid and all those other good statistical concepts. My approach is very non-statistical. It involves percentages, weighting, multiplication, and addition. So it's not heavily as quantitative or as statistical as many other processes are. I think you've all gotten my book, a lot of which was developed while I was at Oracle Corporation. I was quality manager of Global Project Management Service Line, and there I would ask managers basically one question in many forms, which would be, tell me in measurable terms why you make the money you do. And they would answer in terms of what I call throughput or input, the hours they spent, the meetings they held. And I said, no, what results do you create or produce that earns you the money you make? And they couldn't really answer my question. And I said, well, my job is to ask you that question and then teach you how to answer it. So let's move on. Where's the little arrow on the bottom here to move to the next slide?
You may need to move up your slide deck, your screen up so you can see it now.
Oh, there it is. Good. Okay, thank you. So there I am. Okay, he's really cute. All right, next. Now tell me just through chat, what sort of industries or government or NGOs or academic environments do you work in? Let's just get some kind of profile. I guess you can chat your answer. And I'm
Looks like Walter typed in training and development, T&D.
How come you can see that and I can't? Oh, retail management. Okay. Not in training. That's fine. Training department.
Gina writes, I work in higher education, international student and scholar services. Mary writes, Save the Children. Patrick has retail management, not in training field. Maya, training department. Nat, government, training and development. Melissa, training government.
No, this is Brian O. If I can't type, but I'm in diversity and inclusion.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian.
Well, training has its own, I assume you all are thoroughly versed in Robert Mager and behavioral objectives, of course, and also Kirkpatrick's and the 4 levels of training evaluation, where 99% of the world's training evaluation is level 1, i.e., did you like it, and what are your plans to use it, but not even level 2, which is testing if whether or not learning even occurred. Okay, now how many of you are, actually for my approach it doesn't matter if you're internal or external or an employee or a consultant. It's just, hello? Should someone mute their laptop or something?
That's Kristen. Kristen, can you mute your line? Thank you.
Okay, so whether or not you're internal or external, it's all the same methodology. And that's one of the things about this methodology is this methodology applies to any function at any level because the methodology is value-based, which we will get into. Okay, raised it. All right, here we go. So measure. I don't know how many of you are familiar with management by objectives, but basically a lot of my approach is based on that. And the mantra in management by objectives is commit to no task or investment of any energy or time or money or resources until you first define in measurable terms what you mean by success. And that's something that managers rarely do. They get so caught up in activity, running around from crisis to crisis, they never really establish measurable statements of success. And if there's any meeting that I run or attend, my first question or statement is, if by the end of the half hour or hour this meeting is successful, what will we have accomplished? What decisions will we have made? What problems will we have solved? What information will we have shared? So I start at the end, and I think that's one of the chapters in what's his face, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Start at the end. Yeah, whatever. So the whole idea of measure is establish in measurable terms what you hope to achieve. All righty. If I can find my cursor, there you are. Manage. Once you've established the end result in measurable terms, the next process is kind of like a SWOT. Scan your environment and identify all those variables that will help or hinder your success. And that's what you do all the time anyway. So for variables that might get in your way, your task would be to set up programs, systems, procedures, having interpersonal discussions that minimize or eliminate those things that get in your way, and for those things that will support your achieving success, to strengthen them and increase them. So that's the manage part. And the next part is my third M, is magnify. This is the assumption that once you've done something repeatedly, let's say over a time frame of a year, the next time you have that same task, you ought to be able to do it faster or more of it or cheaper, because you're becoming more and more skilled and maybe reaching a level of what in one learning model would be called unconscious competence. That's how most of us drive a car. We are unconsciously competent. It's how we tie our shoelaces, brush our teeth. There's things we do every day. It's called habit, and we really don't have to pay much attention to what we're doing. So that's the whole idea of magnify, is do it better the next time around. And I will take the next time around to mean yearly increments, since that's, the annual performance review or agreement or managerial planning process. Purpose. The purpose of this presentation is for you to use the 3 M's of performance to clarify the key value areas and performance objectives you bring to your organization or clients. And by key value areas, I mean an area of your professional activity that is no less than a 20% weighting. And we'll get into that with examples and, one of you volunteering. So I define the word key as no less than 20% of all that you contribute, or no less than 20 cents per dollar of the consulting fee or salary that you earn. And performance objectives are the old SMART objectives: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-framed. So I have nothing new to contribute for that particular term. As a result of this presentation, participants, meaning you, will be able to describe the value you create for your role. And my definition of value is delivering to your employer or to your client what their expectations were for the money you earn. Or we can turn it around: value is what you get when you go into a McDonald's restaurant and you can leave in 5 minutes, with 1 hot cheeseburger and fries and maybe a Coke. So you go into a restaurant with certain expectations, and when the restaurant meets your expectations for the money you expect to pay, you've achieved value. If you buy a car and you're told it's 20,000 miles maintenance free, and that's what happens, you say, I'm happy, I got the car I expected. If your car goes for 30,000 miles with no maintenance, you've gotten 50% more value than you paid for. And we'll get into that in terms of your own productivity. If your car requires maintenance at 15,000 miles, then you do not get value and you're unhappy. And that's how we make judgments every day, if not every hour. And this presentation, you will learn about defining value in precise qualitative and or quantitative metrics. I think I am unique in my approach in that I place a lot of emphasis on qualitative metrics, where what drives me crazy is people, when they talk about measuring, they always equate it with quantifying, which I don't. I talk about measuring as not knowing a priori until you know what success is, whether the metrics will be qualitative or quantitative or some mix. I also talk about 4 standards of performance value. When you're working or delivering services at a standard that you and your boss or you and your client have predefined as satisfactory, you are creating value and earning your paycheck or your consulting fee. When you create more than that, you're creating greater value than what you're getting paid for, and there's an inequity. I imagine as a consultant, you're not going to tell a client, hey, I'm giving you more than you're paying for, give me more money. However, one way I sell this process, internally, is when people want to resist, I tell them, here's a way to, in very precise, measurable terms, show your boss that you're not making enough money, that your value is well beyond what he and you have defined as satisfactory performance. So measure, manage, now I talked about standards of performance when you're managing. I always start with satisfactory. First, create a picture with words and numbers that define or describes a successful outcome at the standard of satisfactory, no more or less than you're getting paid to create, earns the paycheck, and delivers expected value to the customer, employer, client, etc. The next standard is very good, better, faster, cheaper, exceeding expectations of the fee or salary. And just in a general term, that might be worth 10% more in money terms than satisfactory. And then at a highest level, excellent, dramatically better, faster, cheaper, or creatively discontinuous from very good. And I was working with a company, a lot of my examples will be international. I was working with a company in Egypt, and marketing was always complaining that the salespeople didn't get their data to them quickly enough so they could track, what products were selling off the shelf. So satisfactory would have been handing in data, by the deadline, let's say weekly by Friday. Very good might have been handing in the data certainly very early Friday. You can't hand it in too early or it wouldn't cover the whole week. And my suggestion for excellent, and this is before everyone had a smartphone, was to have an instrument where they could enter data, and in real time it would go right to some database, in the marketing department. And that's very common now, but then it wasn't, certainly not in Egypt. And then the standard of unsatisfactory I typically don't spend much time with, because anything lacking in satisfactory is unsatisfactory, whether it's timeliness or quantity or quality, whatever dimension, satisfactory, however it's been described.
Mel, we have a comment from Patty that says, I don't have a choice. And I think she's meaning, Patty, can you elaborate in the chat what you mean by you don't have a choice? What don't you have a choice in? Maybe you might open up your line and share that with us. I don't have a choice. Something else besides Q? No, besides quality, as in question. Oh, that's okay. All right, very good. Mel, she says we can keep going. We'll keep going.
Yeah, great. Principles of the 3Ms approach. The 3Ms approach is universal. Whether you're measuring the linguistic fluency or the affection of a lover or boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse. In fact, I've just created an outline for my next book called The Metrics of Relationships. And that's so people can explore what they mean by sensitive or caring or supportive. You know, all these emotionally laden terms, all of which have a behavioral component which is measurable. And I've already run workshops for various groups on that, and it's going very well. So I'm promising people more clarity in their relationships, and what I take away is their experience as a case study or material for the book. So the 3Ms approach is universal. It can measure anything or many metrics, one methodology. What happens in large organizations or corporations is every function has its own metrics. The finance has terms of money, dollars, cents, $1,000, $1 million, and marketing has other metrics like share, how many new products were developed, or how many inventions were commercialized. So in large organizations with complex functions, you've got apples and oranges and bananas. And with my approach, everyone's using the same methodology, which is based on value. So the guy sweeping the floor is creating value by sweeping the floor at a standard of satisfactory, and the CEO is earning his $1 or $2 million. What?
Or her.
Oh, okay, or more, or less. And the CEO is earning the millions by creating value at that level. So everyone is equal in terms of the methodology. They're all creating products or services that earn their paycheck, regardless of what the paycheck is. And everything is measurable. There's so many people in the metrics field, even in the metrics field, who say, if you can't quantify it, you can't measure it, which is a lie. They're just not familiar with qualitative metrics. And if I asked you about your relationships with your spouse, lover, children, you wouldn't say, oh, it's about a 5, or it's a 7, or it's a 2. You would give me qualitative responses. Let's talk about lovers. You might say, well, we have a monogamous relationship. He's dependable. We have lots of fun, and we are adventurous. So all of your descriptors, your metrics descriptors of a relationship would be qualitative. Another thing I like to cite is if any of you watch competitive ballroom dancing or ice skating or Summer Olympics, many of the performances are balletic. You know, they're dance-like performances, and yet 10 judges from 10 countries, when they give their ratings, let's say from 0 to 10, their intervals are like a half of a number. You know, you'll see the numbers go 8, 8.5, 7.5, 8, 8, 8. And the point is, all of these judges have a template in their head of a 10, and then they're subtracting points for things that vary from a 10, except for, what's her name, Andrea Comaneci, the gymnast from Romania, who did score a 10. So she measured up to their qualitative performance template. Qualitative measures can be as rigorous as the quantitative.
Thank you, Walter. Nadia, you didn't get the name right, Walter. Nadia Comaneci. Walter happens to be Romanian.
Well, good for him and Nadia. I'll never say her name wrong ever again. And that's measurable. I suggest you read restaurant reviews, and if you get the Weekender on the Friday Washington Post, although I guess some of you are from all over the world, I don't know, but start reading restaurant reviews and you'll see all the qualitative metrics. You know, lighting, was the lettuce wilted around the edges? Was the fruit salad dressing too tangy or tart or too sweet? So these menus are described very precisely in qualitative metrics, which is why a Michelin guide to restaurants in the world can rate a restaurant as the best in America or the best in France, because all these experts on food have the vocabulary. The other thing I suggest is go to a wine tasting. I like to go to wine tasting just for the vocabulary. I'm not a big wine drinker. You know, the woodiness, the tardiness, the fruitiness. So it's just other examples of the rigor of qualitative metrics. Now regarding...
Mel, I don't know if Brian
yes.
is still on, but Brian, when he did his special report, he said that CEOs actually like qualitative metrics because it's like a story and they remember them more than the numbers.
Oh, good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. In the last statement there, the only negotiation is the accuracy. You know, if I say I'll meet you tomorrow at 3, is it precisely at 3 or is it 10 at 3? What was that?
It's Nat's line. And that's Erica. Can everyone mute their lines? Thank you.
I assume you've gone through this exercise before. Anyway, so accuracy. If you watch downhill skiing during the Winter Olympics, what's the difference between the winner and a loser? It's 0.01 seconds. So that's how accurate that particular event is measured. But if you say, I'll be around 6 tonight, it can be a wider variation than 1/100th of a second. And then the frequency. You know, someone's in the emergency room of a hospital, maybe the frequency of measuring their heart rate and other vital life signs might be every minute. But I'm sure for most of us, we're not measuring our heartbeat or whatever unless we're going on vacation or applying for a job where a health exam is required. So you can have accuracy as a variation in metrics, frequency, scalability, specificity, etc., etc. But it's all following the same methodology. Scalability is infinite. When it comes to the creation of the universe as we know it, although these theories seem to get turned upside down every 6 months to a year when a new picture is taken. You know, is the universe 15 billion years old or is it 14.5 billion years? You know, that's the range of specificity or accuracy for these cosmic metrics. And then there's the level of metrics. Are we measuring in an organizational hierarchy, at what level are we taking metrics of, let's say, supervisory skills? You know, at the first level, there's one set. If you're a director, that's a different set. If you're the CEO, that's a different set. So qualitative metrics have specificity regarding level. And goals are different from objectives, as I define it, and I use these terms very precisely. Well, I have to. I mean, it's metrics after all. So goal is directional, improved delivery date. Objectives are SMART, as I said before. So the objectives supporting improved delivery date would be more than 90% on-time deliveries by 1 October 2015. That's an objective. And what drives me crazy is, as I consult all over the world, people use terms like measurable goal. And I have to just keep my mouth shut often. What's interesting now, I'm here in Namibia, that's in southern Africa, and I'm evaluating a 4-year program of the government putting in a performance measurement system, a PMS, which ironically, I lived here 20 years ago. I started that system. And they've kept the name, but the animal looks very different. And what is driving me crazy is it's a government committed to greater transparency and accountability and higher service delivery levels and competitiveness and efficiency, and no metrics for any of those terms. It's all caca. And part of my critique will be that it's all caca. I probably won't use those words in my report, but something similar. And no ambiguity. No adjectives or adverbs are allowed because they're all judgmental. And here's a cutesy diagram from your esteemed professor, Catherine. Value equals money. I've said that earlier. Value is what you get, what you pay for when it meets your expectations. And again, it's all about value, and value is all about money. In my Metrics of Relationship book, it won't be about money, it will be about a psychic currency. You know, you get love or you give love in return for other behaviors or emotions that also are measurable. Getting what you expected for the money you paid. Everything is about creating value for the money you get paid as a learning and development professional. And you're here attending this webinar because of money. You know, at some level of your involvement, it's so you can make more money or make the same amount of money, but easier or more creatively.
With more flexibility.
You mean becoming more flexible by learning metrics?
Maybe it's working from home, or it's just having some flexibility.
Okay, I don't see how that ties in with metrics so precisely, but sure. My methodology is irrespective of where you work, how you work, what country you work in, what your working behavior is or habits. The whole idea of my metrics approach is, are you delivering results that you're getting paid to produce, and are you able to define those results in very rigorous, measurable terms? And whether or not you do the work yourself or hire other people to do it, that's irrelevant, because at some level you're the one that created the value. In fact, I was working with someone in another country, and my report was so boring to me I was going brain dead. So I paid my colleague $6,000, and she wrote the report. And, you know, for my authorship, she got the money, I got the credit, so what? It's irrelevant. I delivered value to the client, which was the report. One other key area in my approach, which is not so unique, is line of sight or hierarchical alignment. To all of you, as you work at some level of your organization, can you see how your slice of the pie contributes upward all the way up to the corporate or generic organizational objectives? And very often when I do long-term consulting, for the first time people actually discover what their boss's objectives are, that they're supposed to be supporting, and even going all the way up. And sometimes it's difficult for them to even figure out what those higher level objectives are, which in theory they're contributing to, even at some modest level. All objectives have team and or individual ownership from the top to the bottom. I doubt that any one of you is doing anything that you can do only on your own. In a complex organization, we're always interdependent. You know, no man is an island, or to be more PC, no person is an island. We all have interdependencies. And if you're a member of a team, you can assign weighted value as a weighted proportion between individual and team. In other words, if your results are outstanding, as they can be in a mediocre team, this process allows your individual contribution to have a weighted value so you can be rewarded appropriately even when others are. Because my older son is taking a degree from results. It's not about the risk you took or the time you put in or how much sweat you had to go through. It's all about results. So in my approach, if it takes you 5 days to produce results and it takes me 1 day to produce those same results, we are contributing equal value. It's not about your time or effort. It's about results, very precisely. And I waver on that depending on, you know, strong arguments and what others are able to persuade me to change. And value is about creating greater results. It's not time, effort, or risk. Okay. Alignment, I've mentioned that. The interpersonal or managerial relationship is part of the objective. Boss-client must contribute to your success. I have what I call a 3M's template, and one of the sections is, here's what I'm accountable for, and another section is, my supervisor is accountable for the following kinds of support. Because without your supervisor's support or your client's support to achieve an objective, you're not going to be able to do much. And as a consultant, one consulting skill is how to confront your client when they will renege on what they promised to help you with. That's just predictable. And this approach creates multi-directional alignment, hierarchical, horizontal, cross-functional, depending on the complexity of your organization. I'm not going to get into this deeply, but what happens when people go through this process and have very precise objectives and transparent accountabilities? Many realize they're accountable for something, but their level of authority is maybe consult. They really can't decide or approve. And there are many variations of these terms. And for me, approve is you can sign the paycheck or the purchasing order, you know, that ultimate authority to control the money. And my approach does not distinguish between being accountable or doing the work oneself. So for this report writing task, I was accountable and I paid someone else to do it. And the client got a really good report. I was out $6,000, but it was well worth it not to go brain dead going through a lot of stuff. Online application. In one company, a .com startup, I created an online version of this approach with a search engine. So if your function had a training objective, you could put the word training, and everyone else that had training would pop up in a list, and then it would be up to you to talk to them or not to see maybe you were overlapping. And if you thought others should have a similar objective and you found no one, that means there was a gap. So that's the whole idea of virtual teaming. What do you have to gain alignment with to accomplish what you're getting paid to do?
Who do you have to gain alignment with to accomplish what you're getting paid to do?
Yeah, I've probably mentioned that, but let's get some chat answers. Who do you have to have a contract with in your organization to make sure you can get your work done?
So Walter says stakeholders.
Yes.
Go, Brian.
Yeah, certainly your super.
I was saying executive sponsors.
Executive sponsors.
Good. One way I've used this approach when I've been an internal, I've worked for a Quaker Oats company in Chicago and pharmaceuticals and Chicago Board Options Exchange. I've worked in the corporate sector. And when I lay out a contract with my boss based on this methodology, where they have very specific supportive behaviors of the results I'm accountable to achieve, and when they renege on their commitment, as they always will, I just go up to them and say, hey, if you want me to do this much work at this level of quality in this time frame, I can't do that anymore because you're not giving me the support that those metrics are dependent on. And then my next question is, so do we want to delay the deliverable, make it of less quality, or less of it in quantity? And basically what I get from them is a very lengthy apology, and they get back on track. So it's a confrontation, but I'm really confronting them with metrics and confronting them with what they promised to deliver so I could achieve my results. So I'm very comfortable doing that.
Hey,
My
Mel,
approach, go on.
you just reminded me of something. I've heard it said that you can have it good, fast, or cheap, but not all three. All pick two.
Okay, good, fast, cheap. I use the phrase a lot: better, faster, cheaper. It depends. I would question whether you can have good, cheap, and faster. I mean,
That's what he was saying. You can choose two, but not all three.
I disagree. I mean, let me see if I can think of something. I think, especially with technology, we can do so much faster and better and cheaper, with all the free apps that are available. So I think that notion of you can have better, faster, and cheaper is an outmoded notion, and it's proven to be outmoded daily. But that's another conversation, I suppose. My approach is forward movement. It's about what metrics, what success do you hope to achieve as defined by these metrics. A lot of metrics approaches are historical, like an accountant who's keeping records of expenses. Instead of saying, for this accomplishment, how much should we budget, and within that budgetary allocation, how good should it be and how fast should it be delivered. So that's the idea of creating a success scenario, and then you start to work on it. But so many metrics approaches are historical. And I talk about predefined standards of performance, which is MBO, management by objectives. It's only 50 years old. And again, the principle is do nothing until you first define your success in measurable terms. In fact, you live most of your life this way. My assumption is when you wake up in the morning, you have a picture in mind of, I'll be at my desk by 9 o'clock, dressed in a certain way, prepared to deliver something or other. And then once you've defined your objective, then you have to plan, how do I get there? And you calculate traffic and taking public transportation or cycling or walking, and you anticipate what barriers might get in your way, so you're managing toward the measurable outcome you already defined. So this whole 3Ms approach is really how most people live their lives. When you buy a house, your measurable objective is home ownership, and then you calculate or manage expenses and savings and paying the mortgage and all the other stuff. So what my approach does is it brings a lot of unconscious behavior to a level of consciousness, especially when you have to work with other people. So you really want to have access to a vocabulary and concepts that support teamwork. And I use the term aggregate, which would be line of sight from your job up the hierarchy to, the CEO or to the C level, executive level. And cumulative is going forward, where you might have an annual performance objective, but you may have interim objectives. So if by year end you want to achieve something like an 8, then that means, and it doesn't mean that these are co-equal intervals, that means by the third quarter you want to have a 6, and by mid-year you want to have a 4, and by the end of the first quarter you want to have a 2. But things are seasonal and other ways where reaching a 10 does not have co-equal intervals as judged by every 3 months. And it's style-free. My approach can be used by a dictator or someone who's totally collegial, which is what I favor, but in terms of the metrics technology of this approach, style. And you think this way anyway. That's what I've just addressed, is so much of your life is establishing a picture of success, whether it's getting to work on time or your first date with someone, or, well, I won't go there. But anyway, we all have pictures of how we define success, and we manage our lives to get there. All righty. Now, I'd like to have a volunteer, and I'm going to take you through this 3Ms template and create a key value areas for you so that you will know per dollar of your income the proportionate value of each area of results that you deliver. So my key result areas with weightings is no more than 5, because I define the word key as no less than 20% of total value. An example, teacher has KVAs. So we might say her weighted key value areas are as defined by good results in teaching, 60%, working with parents, 20%, working with the administration, 20%. And for each of these, we can have very specific metrics. If you go down to Roman numeral 2, performance objectives, SMART, which I've referenced before, and weightings, and 4 distinguishing standards of performance. So for her key value area of teaching, at a standard of satisfactory, 80% of students pass an end-of-term exam. At very good, equal to or greater than 90%, and at excellent, which is the nearly impossible but achievable, equal to or more than 98% of the students pass some exam. And here's a 3M's template. The template is just the outline. When people have filled it in with specific metrics, I then call it a profile. So here's a colleague of mine who wanted to hire another consultant for his company, and his value areas for that person were availability 30%, independent work 20, quality of work 30, and client rapport 20. Now I'm going to stop giving you examples, and I'd like a volunteer, and the only thing you have to do is answer my questions. So who would like to have total clarity regarding why you get paid and what you get paid to produce?
So I know we have folks that are not shy, and we have 2 people that have phone capability tonight. So I don't know if Patrick, this is a special opportunity for you, or Brian, since you're on the phone, but I don't know if you're going to be not able to stay with us the whole time. Patrick or Brian, would one of you, or Walter, isn't shy either?
I'll go ahead and volunteer, Patrick.
All right. Thanks, Patrick.
Okay.
Did you hear that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your job? What do you do?
I am a salon manager.
Salon? What kind of salon?
Dog grooming.
Dog grooming. Oh, that's really cool. Okay. I'm going to make this more personal, although we could do it for your whole salon. We could do it for you and all of your staff. But think about you. And the reason I like to get personal is people learn this approach better when there's some emotional involvement. In other words, it's their value, it's their job, it's their accountability. Looking at 100% of the value you create for the salon, what key value areas would be the segments of the 100%?
Well, driving sales or reaching a sales goal is the primary one. I'd probably say that's probably 60 or 70% of what I do.
Okay. All right, let's say it's 60. And we've got 40% left.
Managing relations. I don't know what to call that.
Supervising.
Supervising tasks.
Is that the whole 40%?
No. The other part would probably be procedural things, paperwork,
all right, so administration.
expenses, ordering, yes.
Admin. So with my mathematics, we have admin, 20%, and supervision, 20%. So 100% of your value, or 100 cents per dollar, is 60 cents for sales, 20 cents for admin, and 20 cents for supervising. Now the next step, and that's Roman numeral 1 in my template, Roman numeral 2. If in driving sales, your performance by year end is at a standard that you and whoever else you work with is defined as satisfactory, what would those sales be?
Let's just say 300,000.
Okay, that's satisfactory. And what would be very good?
Oh, I can do math. Hold on just a second. We have a bonus system, so
I'll make very good easy for you. I define very good as having 10% greater value. So 10%
Okay.
of 300,000 is what?
330.
Good. See? You're brilliant. Okay. And what would be excellent? Nearly impossible, but if it's impossible, it's not valid.
350 would be tough.
Okay, great. We've now, and that's your performance objective for the key value area of sales. That was easy. Let's do administration, 20%. If by year end, your administrative performance is judged by you and anyone else to be satisfactory, how will I know it? By what measures will your administrative performance be judged as satisfactory?
If my expenses are at 100% of budget.
Okay, that's satisfactory at 100%. I'm writing this down. I think next time I do this, I'm not sure if this thing we're using has a whiteboard where I could actually, write on the screen and you could all see it. Anyway, at satisfactory, you have all your expenses are at 100% of budget. What would be very good?
Very good would be coming in 10% under budget.
Good, so equal to or less than 90% of budget. And what would be excellent?
80% of budget.
Good. So equal to or less than 80%. All right, this is the basic methodology. And when you get into this, you might find that that your sales is not simply 60%. You might have a category of sales like grooming supplies is a separate stream, and maybe customers walking in is a separate stream. So you can have different objectives, all of which would support your key value area of sales. And likewise, administrative, you might want to break down into different administrative streams like, purchasing, record keeping, report writing, all of those sorts of things.
Mel, what about the supervisory piece at 20%?
Okay, Patrick, if by the end of the year your performance as a supervisor is judged as satisfactory, how will I know it?
If I am able to, it gets a little bit more nebulous there.
Yes, it's more nebulous and measurable.
I can just think of like a couple of things. Staff complaints against me.
Okay, good. Wait, let me write that down. Okay, that would be a quantitative metric, number of complaints. What else?
Turnover.
Good. All right, let's just stick with those two.
Okay.
If by the end of the year, and you have 20% key value area of supervising, which in my mathematics allows you two performance objectives. A performance objective can be no less than 10%. And what happens with other approaches, people have a list of 20 so-called objectives, and they're really tasks. Almost as micro. Is at a standard of satisfactory. How will I know it?
Can it be 0?
At satisfactory? Fine. What is it going to be at very good?
Employee kudos or commendations or something.
All right, so we're not talking about complaints anymore. We're talking about quality of feedback to you as a supervisor.
Yes.
So at satisfactory, no complaints but no praise is satisfactory.
Correct.
Okay.
I like that.
And at very good, how many praises should you get? Like over the year, do they take you out to dinner once a month? What's the manifestation of praise?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to. I'm rethinking this in my head.
No, you do know. Often when I do a workshop, I tell people, I'm going to extricate from your brain what you think you don't know but do. And it's just a matter of my continuing to interrogate. So the response of I don't know is simply not true.
For me personally, and it wouldn't be like a trackable metric from my boss's perspective, but anytime my employees were to say, I learned something, or thank you for doing that for me, some type of thanks is good. That's good for me.
All right. And what would be excellent? And you might in your mind have, what if one employee told you I learned something, only one employee once a year? Would that be very good?
That would not be very good.
Aha. So you really do have more specific metrics of how many times or how many employees ought to tell you they learned something for you to judge yourself as being a very good supervisor. You see how much you do know?
Yes.
There we go. And what would be excellent?
Excellent would be one a week from each of my employees.
Good. And that's then really impossible. And if it is impossible, then it's not valid. Excellent is achievable, but almost impossible. All righty. So we can just continue the same process over and over again for any performance that you get paid to produce. And you'll find that as you get more deeply into this, your metrics become more and more subtle, and they become a mix of qualitative and quantitative. Like there's a quality of someone telling you you're a good supervisor. That's a qualitative metric. What people say to you is qualitative. And most of our life is based on qualitative metrics. It's what people say to us and what they do for us. It's not some number they throw at us. Catherine, do you have any ideas of where to go with this? Because maybe we could get to the questions people asked. Because the methodology is the same thing over and over again. And then when I work with people over time, I stop asking them the question except to ask them, what's my next question? You know, to see if they've internalized it and they can ask these things of themselves without me.
Why don't we turn it to the group and see, before we turn to the questions that they had before they learned about the model, if they have any questions about what they've heard tonight.
Yeah, or someone who's thinking, I bet Mel can't measure this. I'd like you to volunteer. Maybe no one's thinking those thoughts.
Well, I guess before we go there, Patrick, was this helpful to you?
Yes. Drilling down to like the most basic thing is unfortunately, you know, we get shuffled around so much, and we just kind of something he said earlier was we just kind of go from like crisis to crisis, and we never stop to drill down to the most basic aspect of what we're doing and fix that or measure that. So I actually hadn't really thought about, you know, I kind of had this nebulous concept in my head of, okay, if I'm doing a good job, then I don't have any complaints from my employees. I don't have a high turnover, and maybe they say, you know, tell what I actually consider good feedback from my employees.
Yeah, and the term good feedback can be very precise in the way you define it. Now here's some next steps for you and others listening. Take what we've done, well, it's my tonight, it's 3 a.m. in the morning for me. Take what you've done, have a staff meeting, share this with them, and see if they agree with your self-concept of these metrics and standards. And then create the same 3M's profile for them. And see if you can reach agreement with total transparency regarding how people determine the value that each contributes to some corporate or salon level objective. So it can be an excellent team building exercise, and it's all by metrics, and there's no ambiguity, zero ambiguity, which will last for as long as you talk to each other. And what I suggest to people is things will shift, change occurs internally and externally, and you should revisit this exercise depending on your environment, either once a quarter, once a month, once every 6 months, depending on whether or not your environment is very, very stable. I did something like this when I worked at the Chicago Board Options Exchange, and when I used the time frame, by the end of the year, how will you know? They would just scream at me and say, we can't see ahead. This was in 1987 when options trading was just breaking all kinds of records. I mean, they had to shut down the computers just to catch up on sales. And I would have workshops like this, and everyone would run to the trading floor because there was a crisis. So I've been in environments where you can't even think about a year. That's like too far out in the future because the environment is so unstable. Anyway, I don't know about your salon. And the other thing is, does your salon have corporate objectives, meaning the highest level of objectives? And can you see your KVAs supportive of those? And does the owner of the shop or some higher level manager agree with you? And what are their objectives? And what are their KVAs? One exercise, and sometimes in a workshop, I'll get 2 people who actually work together, and they may not have had this conversation, except in very nebulous terms. So one may have the other's KVAs at 50%, but that person's self-concept is my KVA is, that same KVA is 20%. So the perception is, why aren't they paying more attention to this? So the KVA level, just to get agreement and clarity, can be very constructive.
So Mel, we have a question from Patty. How does one develop performance objectives for their organization?
Number one, you get the people who own the organization, whether they're professional managers or entrepreneurial or owners, and they go through a basic strategic planning exercise. Mission, vision, goals, maybe core values, and corporate objectives. And they reach agreement across the various functions, and then each functional head take those objectives down to their next level, get agreement through this process, and take it all the way down.
What if you're working in a school system?
Same thing. It doesn't matter what the organization is. The organization has a highest level, whether it's stated or not, of mission, vision, goals, core values. What I find is a lot of people who do strategic planning never do what I call strategic objectives. They never define in measurable terms what the strategic realization ought to be in 3 to 5 years out. And they'll say, well, we don't know what it's going to be like. Well, that means you have no control over achieving your success. And if it's the first time you've done it, you create objectives that are an hypothesis. This whole exercise is an hypothesis. You're creating a fantasy. You can't know its validity until you live into it. You can't live into it in a workshop about it. You live into it by using it, revisiting the process in 3 or 6 months, looking at your KVAs, your objectives, the weightings, the metrics, to see how valuable or how accurate or valid were all of these hypotheses. Okay, it seems to change whenever a new superintendent comes on board. It starts over and over again with every change. Yes. You do this exercise over and over again because this exercise is called teamwork, managing, supervising, etc. There's nothing new about the 3 M's in terms of its purpose. It's what everyone should be doing all the time anyway. Like when I worked at Oracle Corporation or Quaker Oats, I would, introduce myself to a project team or a manager, and they would, listen to my little speech and say, Gesundheit. And they would say, no, I don't have time for that. And depending on the chemistry, I'd say, oh, you don't have time to manage people, to get clarity about what they expect of you and what you expect of them? I mean, the idea that people don't have time to get clarity in their relationship, whether it's work or marriage or socially, is always absurd to me. But I'm obsessed with metrics, so that's my perspective.
So Patty writes, it seems to change whenever a new superintendent comes on board. It starts over and over again with every change.
Right. I addressed that.
I'm sorry.
You do the exercise over and over again. It's called managing.
All right. So, Mel, I know it's late for you. Did you want to turn to the questions that folks have sent in? And
yeah, let me get to the Word document. How do I get rid of this? Let me go up to the top. Yeah, these were good questions. I'm scrolling up. Oh, you can all see this, so you can see me. It's only 6 pages. Oh, here we are. Okay. How do you know when you selected an important metric to keep track of? What are the characters? Okay, my answer briefly. When those who are creating the metrics as part of an interdependent task or team effort have decided that it's useful. I mean, I as an outsider can teach people the skills of creating the metrics they decide is important. I never impose metrics. Sometimes I might suggest a metric or two, but it's up to my client's responsibility to determine in their world what are key or important metrics. Number 2. Oh, this hypothetical. Yeah, you're talking about 2 or more separate streams of metrics that are defined by the specific kind of case. And I said that with the salon with Patrick. In sales, there might be parallel streams of sales. Selling grooming supplies, selling dog hotel services, whatever. So you can have very different cases of law or hospital, and they will each be perhaps so different that their metrics are very different. Negative pushback from management. Seduce them into participating in a 3M's experience. See how it clarifies the relationships, priorities, and performance measurement. One thing I found, and maybe I'm a lousy salesman, there's no intellectual selling of this process until people go through it with some emotional investment, defining the metrics for their job. Like Patrick thinking for the first time in greater specificity, what is it when I think of myself as a good supervisor? And at first saying, I don't know, which of course he does know. It's getting certain kinds of feedback. And this is true of everyone. You don't know what you know in terms of measuring your own performance. And what you need is someone like me with my repertoire of questions. You have the answers, but you don't have the questions. So you cannot access your own knowledge. Like a therapist cannot stand in front of a mirror and do his own therapy. Okay. And I found this at Oracle and other companies where I talked about it, and people go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then they were in a workshop or got involved with this in a more emotional way. They would say to me, well, Mel, why didn't you tell us that's what we do? And I would just, say I have, but it didn't connect. Has my HP style changed over the years? No. the most memorable project I've had about metrics was at Oracle Corporation, which was very dysfunctional. People were brilliant, passionate, educated, and Oracle is successful in spite of itself. My boss used to say, Oracle put the word fun into dysfunctional. Or he would say, Oracle is where the tire meets the sky. Some of his favorite phrases, Mary Winfrey. No, I'm not familiar with that, but I'm sure that I could work with you or someone and develop metrics. Everything is measurable. I can say that a million times, but until you come up with some area of your behavior or your deliverable that you don't think is measurable, again, until you internalize my repertoire of questions, you can't access all the metrics that you know about, feel about, but don't have the vocabulary. You have the vocabulary, you don't know how to access those words to define your own metrics. A good way to encourage. Yeah, here I am in Namibia, and what I'm doing with you tonight, I will do with no one here. It's just not an environment where people have that kind of accountability, motivation, leadership, transparency. It'd be totally not so much hostile, but not comprehending of what this is all about. In fact, I gave my book to a guy in D.C. at the federal government, Office of Management and Budget, and he took the book, and we saw each other a few weeks later, and he said, Mel, this book is fantastic. He said it requires transparency, leadership, and accountability, and it'll never work in the federal government. I think that was a compliment. I'm not sure. But the private sector is where I can have the most success, especially if I have a client who's totally supportive of what I'm there to do. No, a metric is not the objective. A metric is the unit of measurement, or in international development, the KPI, the key performance indicator. There's lots of synonyms for what I call the metric. The objective is the statement of success. You know, where should we be regarding this task a year from now? Initially, is it ever used as a tool for negotiating? Yeah. I worked with some software people in a dot-com startup in Chicago. They hated this. They say, Mel, we're too creative. We work 80 hours a week, and you can't measure what we do. And my response was, if you could measure the results you produce for these 80 hours a week in a way that shows you're not being paid enough, is that worth learning? And they went, oh, okay. And then I won them over, because I could show that for their hierarchy of expectations that they were producing far beyond that for the money they were getting. And if it's not about money, it can be career acceleration, recognition, self-satisfaction, where there may be no financial incentives. I am the frontier. I'm not only the frontier, I'm the history. What I'm preaching is so old. What I bring to this, basically the science of management by objectives, is the notion of qualitative metrics, which is highly neglected in most metrics approaches. The other thing I bring is metrics for team building, metrics for clarifying interdependency of task. Even in balanced scorecard, there's a real neglect of qualitative metrics or the notion of people really clarifying with each other, not just the 4 categories that balanced scorecard, gives people. Although no one implements balanced scorecard in the textbook fashion. Where are we headed? Well, ideally there'd be a metrics corporate culture and change the way people. In other words, if I were your boss and we'd gone through this process, I wouldn't say to you, Kristen, I've got another assignment that you have to get on. I'd say, Kristen, let's take out those KVAs and performance objectives, and let's look at what you're accountable for with my support, and let's see what we get rid of or compromise so you can take on this new objective which I can support. And what may take 10 minutes initially, it becomes part of your conversation over coffee. You know, initially this process becomes very tedious and ponderous, but the more you do it, and my ratios are, for every hour you might spend on this, the first time you do it, the second time you do it, it'll be 15 minutes. And the third time you do it, it'll be 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and then it's over coffee. How are things going? Anything I should know and how I can support you. And I've supervised before in the corporate sector. Also, I worked in Gaza managing an office there, and my initial speech to my subordinates was, I'm here to make you successful. And if you're not successful, it's my fault. And that's what every supervisor ought to say to subordinates, that if they're not doing well, it's the supervisory's fault, unless he's inherited some misfits that, you know, shouldn't have been there in the first place. And that happens. Oh, Bob Mager. Yeah, for all of you people in the training field, you know, if you don't know Bob Mager for behavioral objectives, which comes close to my metrics approach, and you don't know Kirkpatrick, where at level 2, you're testing very specific knowledge and skills. I won't even deal with level 3 or 4. Those are so rare. Catrice. Yeah, that's a very open-ended question. If you're the only one enamored with this process in an environment that's not so much hostile to it, but indifferent to it, you're probably just going to create some problems. That's like here in Namibia. The people I'm working with will hear none of what I've told you tonight, or my tonight, or now my morning at 3:17 a.m. The sacrifices I make. Okay. If you're interested in project management, more of greater value in the PMI world, Project Management Institute, is getting a PMP, Project Management Professional. That's a great credential to have in America. There's a British equivalent, but I think in other countries not controlled by, let's say, a British tradition, a PMP is becoming almost a world standard of having a project management credential. And PMP is not just paper and pencil, but you must have had, I forgot, 5 years or some number of years of project management. So it's a really solid credential. Use the 3 M's to get your feet wet. Start with your own contributions. It's an indicator of recovery from surgery. Oh yeah, good. That's in my book about how I thought getting back onto the tennis court quickly was a great metric. You know, how soon would I be playing tennis? Until a doctor said no, because you might be playing tennis next week, but the week afterwards you'll be back in surgery. So that's where I had picked a very bad metric to measure the success of surgery. That I use that a lot to let people know how wrong you can be. There's some paragraphs I excluded from this webinar on, it comes from a book, Reinventing Government. A couple of paragraphs I use a lot of, where it's all about asking questions. And metrics, wherever you start, it forces you into asking different questions about the nature of your work or the nature of the organization. And 3Ms is basically a linguistic exercise in talking to people in a different way, more precisely, about how to get the work done. Okay, I don't know what a development foreign language is. Maybe the phrase isn't expressed precisely. Is Matt here tonight?
Yes, I believe he is. Matt, would you like to unmute your line?
Sounds like, is that a no? All right, I'll continue. Not overseas. The international development is a different animal regarding metrics. Yeah, they simply, there's a thing called logical framework, which is a hierarchical logic of, at the bottom you start with resources, then you have activity, then you have outcome, output, impact. It's a different hierarchy of measuring and tracking performance. And I've taught it overseas, and it's used a lot at AID and the World Bank. And for me, it's still very ambiguous. But it's better than people having no concept of what they're being paid to accomplish. Deniatha Woods, as an independent consultant, no, I'm a dependent consultant. I depend on clients. Introduce how I'll hold both of us accountable for my achieving the results I'm getting paid for. Yeah, I've done this kind of workshop for consulting groups, especially a Midwestern consulting group in Chicago. And basically it was using this methodology to draw up a contract with the client. You know, I will accomplish the following in precise measurable terms for this fee, and here is your obligation as my client to support my achievement. And when you renege on some of your commitment, I will let you know, because I want to make the money I'm charging you for, and I want you to support that as well. So, I mean, I don't say those words exactly, but you find your own style without violating the integrity of the methodology. Okay, these words, I use objectives in a very specific way, you know, SMART or performance-based outcomes. I'm not sure what the difference is, so. And where's my Yoruba friend? Are you there, Ade? No? Okay. I answered some of, I'm not sure if that's a masculine or a feminine name. Ade Diwura. Ade, I think, happiness, something. And I responded with a few Yoruba phrases. Shotigbo, do you understand? Okay. I speak pretty good Yoruba. I was in the Peace Corps in Nigeria for 2 years in a Yoruba-speaking area. Okay. Best approach. Yeah, in any change effort, it should really start at the top. I don't think much change occurs at the bottom, you know, unless it's a revolution or a union going on strike. Most corporate change has to start at the top with corporate commitment and leadership. And now we get into the discipline of change management. But that's a whole other conversation. Okay, I'm done. It's 3:22 a.m. I have to be up at 6 a.m. I'll get 2.5 hours sleep, but it was worth it.
Mel, thank you so much. I know that Matt is, he does not have a mic. That's why he wasn't able to respond to the inquiry. But I just wanted to thank you for stepping us through the 3M of performance model that you have. I know that it's getting me to rethink or remind me of questions I should be asking myself and the alignment with clients.
Right.
And we all appreciate your commitment to, you had no idea you were going to be in Namibia and carrying on and still presenting tonight. So we're very grateful. And the kudos are all coming in.
And what I'm grateful for, because Catherine and I were online together maybe 3 hours ago, and it was just horrible. But this hotel where I'm staying at, typically the internet connectivity is what we've enjoyed this time. So that's my gratitude. Now,
I'm very
for any of
grateful
you-
too, Mel. I was concerned.
Yeah, right. For any of you that want to go further with this, just go as far as you can with what I did with Patrick and email it to me. And I'll, what may take you hours takes me seconds. I've been doing this for many years and it's fun.
That's very generous. Thank you. And everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a great presentation, Mel. You always make it fun. So even with, it being a late hour there, your energy is still higher than most people when it's their regular hours. So, all right. All have a great week and have a great night. Take care.
And for me, good morning.
Thank you. Appreciate it.